My name is Cece Webb. I was born in Athens and have lived here for most of my adult life. I sent a version of this speech as an email to Mayor Gertz on January 10th. I never received an answer, so I decided to update it and say it here in hopes of maybe getting more of a response. You might remember me as the December 5th public comment speaker who asked whether the commission was going to ask us to sit down and shut up in regards to an Athens ceasefire resolution. We came into that December 5th meeting angry, scared, and desperate. For 2 months, we had watched a genocide play out across our phone screens. Our Palestinian friends were, and still are, suffering losses of a profound and devastating nature, yet we were repeatedly dismissed and ignored by the institutions built to support us, including UGA. We came to City Hall that night because we had exhausted all other options. We may not have approached the commission with the most skill, the best strategy, the friendliest attitude, but we approached in good faith. Admittedly, we also came expecting to once more be dismissed and criticized, and we were not disappointed in that expectation. We were condemned as privileged and belligerent. Still, we continued to organize and made what we felt to be real headway in our goal. Now we come to find out, Mayor Gertz, that although you would not say so for your constituents on camera, you refused to allow a ceasefire resolution on the agenda. This decision you have made after your many years in local government because you believe that an open letter will be more effective in forwarding federal support for a ceasefire in Gaza. The questions I have are, if this is true, why didn't you sign the Jewish Voice for Peace ceasefire letter that was sent to you by one of your constituents? Why does a ceasefire resolution have to be replaced by an open letter? Why, if you claim to be interested in state or nationwide efforts, do you refuse to support a resolution that directly appeals to those very federal powers who you some weeks ago said we should be calling instead? Why, in the face of a literal genocide, and I am not here to convince anybody that it's a genocide, we do have leaflets if you want to be convinced or learn about it. Why, in the face of a genocide that is affecting residents in our community, should we not exercise every possible measure we can take, even as a small Georgia town across the ocean from Palestine? Under your dismissal is a fundamental misunderstanding of what it is we're fighting for and what it is to organize as a community. People are dying. People just like us are dying and suffering horrifically, painfully, unnecessarily, and so publicly that the people of Gaza seem to mourn for a living. They have had the privacy of grief stolen from them just so that they can try to evoke some sympathy from the Western powers who have the power to stop their genocide. And we know for a fact that our federal government is funding and supplying this genocide. We are trying to change the moral fabric of America for the better. We are trying to stop imperialist exploits that harm and kill people every year who are no different, no less civilized, and no less feeling than we are. I would argue at this point in the West, humanity and civility have declared themselves dead.
Good evening. My name is Elle Lewis, and I've returned once again to ask for a ceasefire resolution. I'm here again because in a truly disappointing turn of events, Kelly Gertz sent an email with a few inaccuracies that seem to have discouraged some commissioners from meeting with their very own electorates. These were people who were unable to make these meetings because of work or childcare scheduling, people who live in your districts and wanted to meet with you, the people you said you wanted to hear from, Jewish residents as well. And so Gertz sent this email because he said his experience as an educator allows him to see that these secondary, tertiary campaigns are ineffective. So I thought I should talk about my experience and my background. Before I was a business owner, I was a campaign manager, and I worked on issue-based campaigns. The last two campaigns I worked on were passing the minimum wage and paid sick days in Connecticut. We were able to pass these bills with the full weight of several multi-billion-dollar corporations because of what you called secondary, tertiary campaigns, getting local politicians on our side to really amplify the voices of their constituents who needed a living wage and who needed paid sick days to pass. So this was done, and done because of the involvement of local politicians. This is what this ceasefire resolution would do. It helps to cut through the noise of lobbyists. We have powerful defense contractors in APAC talking to our senators and our representatives. A ceasefire resolution helps to cut through that noise and that chaos. And so that is why I know that this is an effective strategy. Given my background and my history as well, I've also learned to recognize when something becomes a mobilizing moment for voters. And so not only does this issue of mass death and 31,000 people killed with 40 million US dollars and American-made weapons, not only does that become a mobilizing issue, how the commission has reacted to our calls for a ceasefire, that becomes a mobilizing issue. Hearing that our commissioner thinks that we are not as important as other things she has going on, that's something that makes people ready to go out and knock on doors and talk about the lack of regard that commissioners have for their constituents. So given that 31,000 people killed in a matter of months will not move you, I'm hoping that letting you know inaction at this moment is not an option.
Thank you, Elle. I appreciate you coming this evening.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Morgan Tate, and I'm a permanent resident. I'm at 1909 South Millage Avenue. As my Commissioner Hamby noted earlier, it is your job to be responsive to the constituents of Athens. I, like many people before me, have asked you to stand with Palestinian and Jewish Athenians who are being psychologically harmed by this genocide, paid for by our tax dollars. Though I'm not Jewish, nor am I Palestinian, I have struggled with anxiety and deep despair watching as Palestinian children are shot at point blank murdered in the street with bullets paid for by our tax dollars. Paid for by our tax dollars. The speed and intensity of this genocide is disturbing. You have the power, like many other cities across the country that have done so far, to demand a ceasefire. Calling for a ceasefire is the very least that we can do to ensure the emotional safety of Athenians, as well as the fiscal responsibility you bear in making sure our tax dollars are used wisely. This is a campaign issue for me in future elections. Thank you for taking your responsibilities for Athenians and to Athenians very carefully and seriously, and I appreciate previous attempts to deal with injustice such as Linentown. We can also do this here for now with our Palestinian Americans in Athens, as well as our Jewish Athenian Americans as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Morgan. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Julian Nyut. I moved to Athens in 2021 to attend UGA, and I liked it so much I decided to stay. I'm also a U.S. Army veteran. I'm a musician, and I'm a music teacher, and I'm a Jew. Sergeant William Jerome Rivers, 46, of Carrollton, Georgia. Specialist Kennedy Layden Sanders, 24, of Waycross, Georgia. And Specialist Brianna Alexandria Moffett, 23, of Savannah, Georgia, died January 28th of this year in Jordan. We mourn these fallen American soldiers. They were killed, likely in their beds, by a drone. The drone was linked to Iran and Russia. These 3 soldiers were from Georgia, and they were all African American. Is a soldier who calls Athens home next? Mayor Gertz, please tell us again that what happens in Gaza has nothing to do with what happens here in Athens. Please tell us again that you don't care about the soldiers recruited at events like AthFest. Please tell us again their death was inevitable, that you could do nothing while you did nothing, while you refused to do what you could so that you didn't have to be inconvenienced, disliked by people who you think matter more than soldiers do, matter more than the civilians in Gaza do, matter more than we do, people that you fear more than you fear us. Since October 7th, since Israel began its retaliatory barrage on Palestinian civilians, there have been more than 150 attacks on U.S. forces in the Middle East. In response to this drone strike that killed 3 of our fellow Georgians, the U.S. has retaliated by attacking a multitude of locations in Iraq and Syria. What the U.S. is doing in the region is clearly escalating aggression. This aggression puts the lives of American soldiers at risk. And for what reason? How are the lives of people here in Athens improved by aggression in the Middle East, enriched by the murder of 26,000 Palestinians, including almost 12,000 children? How are the lives of people here in Athens affirmed by events in Gaza like these? A child came in alive, literally burnt to the bone. Their hands were contracting. Their face was just charcoal. And they were alive and talking, and we had no morphine. These are the words of a Dr. Harrington from the UK. This was from a BBC article. This is what the US is funding, what Athens is funding, and what our soldiers are supporting through proxy conflicts. This is what we are putting our soldiers' lives on the line for. Mayor Gertz, you and I exchanged emails in the past about how this aggression would likely lead to war for the US. You responded telling us to write a letter. We did, and it's still sitting in your mailbox waiting to be signed. Veterans like myself will remember that you slept safe in your own bed, refusing to do what little you could while soldiers were being ordered to kill children and being killed in their sleep. That will be your legacy. Or you can stand up for the people of Athens, stand up for the soldiers calling Athens home, stand up for justice and democracy, and allow a ceasefire resolution on the agenda.
Thank you, Julianne. I appreciate you coming tonight.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Catherine Little-Page. I am 27 and I am a Athens resident since 2017. I've been a legally disabled worker since 2017 or 2019. This is relevant because it represents my current walk of life and how I feel about the rental market in Athens after having rented here since 2017. As Americans, we're realizing how interconnected our struggles are, especially since the beginning of October. I'm asking our city commissioners to continue considering our Palestinian neighbors' voices during this time. I'm here to support the interests of Athens against apartheid as the most accessible way for us as a community to do everything we can. I ask Athens-Clarke County to take an official stance against the atrocities that are closer to home than we wish to acknowledge, particularly race and police brutality issues that I fear could escalate if Atlanta's Cop City would come to fruition. I humbly ask that you consider anything in your power to uplift and protect these voices. Whether they are students, concerned citizens such as myself, and Palestinian Americans and allies. A ceasefire resolution has been presented forth to you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Good evening.
Good evening. Dylan Woolsey, 395 River Road. I'm glad that you all passed the short-term rental regulations here tonight, but as
Good evening.
Good evening. Hello, my name is Colin Cochran. I'm a fourth-generation UGA student, and while not from Athens-Clarke County, I do consider it my second home. I've been coming down here at least 2 to 3 times a year since I was 8 years old. I've come down here for football games and just for summer vacation. You may not be able to hear it in my name, but I am Palestinian. My mother family's goes back longer than there are records in Palestine. And yet, between 1948 and 1957, they fled. I am lucky. I have not had to endure the harsh realities of occupation in the West Bank city of Ramallah, where my family is from. But I do have guilt. Why do I get to live a cushy middle-class life while my own people are jailed, tortured, killed, and now blatantly genocide? I know some of you are for a ceasefire resolution, and some of you are completely against it. I'm not here to convince you how to vote. I'm here to convince you that it is your job to put a resolution on the floor. I understand how important local government is. To Mayor Gertz, and maybe to the rest of you on this council, the last name Cochran may sound familiar. My grandfather is Tom Cochran and is the CEO and executive director of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Growing up, my mother and my father both worked with mayors, and my father for the governor of New York. There is a reason organizations like the U.S. Conference of Mayors and the National League of Cities exist. I've grown up talking to mayors about the work that they do. City governments hear people. Party politics are not exaggerated because cities need to run. I agree that passing a resolution does nothing immediately, but local government, especially ones with large constituencies like Athens-Clarke County, send a message when passing a resolution like this one. It says we are against genocide. It says we know what the people want. And most importantly, it says that we listen to all of our people, the people with no real political power or constituencies, people whose land has been occupied and whose self-determination has been denied. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Colin. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Deller Weldon, and I'm a student at the University of Georgia and a temporary resident of Athens District 4. First, I want to thank those of y'all who have responded to us with respect. As my peers have said before, we have been turned away and ignored many times, but we hope to keep building bridges and addressing issues directly pertaining to Athens. And we will not stop talking about Palestine. This is not the only issue that we care about. We also care about the housing crisis in Athens, a topic that we've brought up in conjunction with Gaza before. While we cannot order an immediate ceasefire ourselves, we can at least conscientiously object to Athens' taxes being used to carpet bomb civilians. These funds could go towards any number of local projects, from housing to harm reduction, all sorts of infrastructure. This isn't just an economic issue, this is a genocide. I know that y'all care about people. Y'all care about making our social, economic, and physical environments safer and healthier for the people with whom you live. If you didn't, you wouldn't have run for these positions. It takes a great deal of effort and care to do y'all's jobs, and I do commend you for it. But we don't just live in Athens, we live on Earth. The only true difference between us Athenians and Palestinians is the circumstances of our births. The federal government is using y'all's city's tax money to orchestrate this genocide. The least we can do is conscientiously object to it. To anyone who believes that Athens doesn't have the ability to impact federal and even international affairs, you greatly underestimate your power. Athens has long been a political hotspot, and we've had a strong influence many times, including during election seasons just like this year. Justice in Palestine is an issue of great significance to voters and constituents, and it would be wise to address it. All humans deserve to live with freedom and dignity. The Palestinian people are no exception. The safety of the Jewish people, my family, my friends, cannot, does not, and will not come at the expense of the safety of Palestinians. Criticism of Israel is only anti-Semitic if you believe that Israel represents all Jews, and it most certainly does not. I am proof of that. The fact that I can be accused of hate speech for criticizing the actions of a state that's committing a genocide in my name, that I can be accused of hatred and violence against my own people for defending our fellow humans' right to live, it's insane to me. My whole life, I've been taught that one of the core beliefs of our faith is tikkun olam, or repairing of the world. It holds that, among many other things, wherever we are, it is our duty to make the world a better place to live for everyone. We all deserve freedom and dignity, all of us. And if we don't call out and condemn a genocide now, when will we? Thank you for your time. Shalom.
Thank you, Deller.
Good evening. My name is Ezra Lewis, and I am an Athens resident of District 4. And I just wanted to bring up a couple points. Number one is that global problems are local concerns that we are clearly all concerned. There's a rise of Islamophobia. Our lives have been threatened multiple times by other Athenians, ours being the Students for Justice in Palestine. And the rise of the HB 30 happening, codifying criticisms of Israel occupations as anti-Semitic. Basically, the point I'm trying to say is everyone would love to imagine that they would stand against oppression back in the old days when it's not happening at the time, such as slavery or the Holocaust. But that takes effort and political will. And so I just really hope that you guys can find it within yourselves to take the political will to support a ceasefire and put it on the agenda. There has been 56 local ceasefire resolutions in the United States that have been passed. 16 are currently on the agenda, and 22 have been rejected, and that's a total of 94. So there is a precedent for local municipal organizations. You know what I'm trying to say. for it to be on the agenda. So I just ask that you listen to your constituents and put it on the agenda so that we can have these conversations. And in the face of divisiveness, because I know that's something that y'all are concerned about, is that this divisiveness already exists and it's currently happening. The violence has been against the people that have been fighting for this, both verbally and physically. So I just really ask that by acknowledging this issue, that this will promote further communication and further unity within the community. And I just really ask that you at least acknowledge what we're asking and just put it on the agenda so that people can voice their opinions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ezra. Good evening.
How's it going? My name's Ian. I live on 128 Lake Drive. I come up here, I want to talk about the atrocities going on in Gaza, about the families destroyed, lives ruined, taken, lives lost, and just everything that this commission seems to not have much of a problem with. Last night in a college town, very similar to ours, Austin, Texas, very similar in how, it's a college town, a student was shot for wearing a keffiyeh, from leaving something like this after they were at a protest or some type of event. And you guys still don't think that this is like an issue, that the local politics doesn't get involved with larger geopolitical things. I just think that this is ridiculous. This is a swing state this year. Many of you, as you've made clear, think that this ceasefire is a young, idealistic fantasy. Many students are extremely concerned and are registered to vote in Athens. And those who are not registered here, they come from Gwinnett, many whom come from Gwinnett County, or similar counties like this. Gwinnett County particularly is a very heavy immigrant county, and a lot of the students who come to UGA who you might think don't vote here or don't care, or they're young or they're not registered here, they register there, they vote there, or they vote here. Many of them are registered to vote here because it's easier to vote in your town, in your local municipality when you are in school. These people will be voting in November. They will be voting. So I hope that you consider these things. These are also people, they're not just students who are just going to leave at some point. They're citizens. This is a swing state. A lot of them are registered here. The youth vote is going to be very important for the progressive side of things next year, and it's not going to happen if people are continually disparaging of young people who are trying to get involved with the political process. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ian.
Good evening, Broderick Flanagan, P.O. Box 295. Again, I do commend the organizing of these students for the Athens Against Apartheid. I do personally support putting a ceasefire resolution on the agenda. I didn't really come to, initially come to speak to that this evening, but I do feel like it is important that we do what we can. Chicago actually passed a ceasefire resolution, I believe it was last week. And it does send a message. The chamber erupted in applause. And so I'll just leave that, at that. Please put it on the agenda. And for the commissioners who said they would meet with these groups, I hope you honor those commitments. And for you, Commissioner Taylor, I want to commend you for the courage and vulnerability you showed tonight. It gives me hope to see you stand up for your community in that way. I want to say I appreciate that deeply. It gives me a lot of hope for future work and future generations to come. So people are watching. And then lastly, I want to speak to Mayor Gertz. You and I spoke about the ARPA funds with the workforce development. You told me that, after I came to the meeting to speak about the original facilitator of that bucket of money, being kind of lopsided towards the business side of things, because the bucket is put together, business and workforce development. And so when you have somebody from the Chamber of Commerce facilitating that meeting, which I'm grateful that is being revisited, But I feel like the last time we spoke about it, you said y'all couldn't find a facilitator. So I'm trying to figure out what's going on with that advisory committee that's supposed to be meeting since August of last year. From the documents that I read online about the ARPA funding, the advisory committee, which is made up of several local organizations, has supposed to be meeting monthly since August. And so there are two ways to create affordable housing and to eradicate food insecurities and things of that nature. You can build housing at a certain price point, which you all have said behind this rail that you can't force the private market to build at a certain price point. And then you can also help people to exercise their rights under the NLRA, the National Labor Relations Act. Like, those federal laws exist for a reason, to help balance out the exploitation of certain workers' experience in certain companies and certain working conditions. And so you can help or support organizations and people who are organizing or showing people how to exercise their rights under the NLRA, to organize for better working conditions, to improve their working conditions. The commissioner earlier spoke about quality of life. This is related to quality of life and what we are allowing to happen to low-wage workers here in Athens, in this community. So I hope we have conversations about that soon.
Thank you, Broderick. I appreciate it very much. All right. Now is the time when we have reports from myself, staff, and